Welcome back, folks. We got topic number 7 for you here on Comeback Sports, and that's the Monza Crash Mayhem. It's Max Verstappen, who collided with Lewis Hamilton at Monza, the Italian Grand Prix, very early in the race. Brandon, who was at fault for this crash?
Well, I've got to put the blame on Max Verstappen here, and I've got to agree with the stewards, who also predominantly blamed Max Verstappen for the contact here in this crash at Monza with Lewis Hamilton. I really have to think that, Max Verstappen was just really not calculated in the decision that he was making there, or he was calculated in that it was clearly a move to take out his number one championship contender, Lewis Hamilton. It was clear, obviously, that, there was two different strategies. Mercedes made the right call of putting Lewis Hamilton out on the hard tire, and also Valtteri Bottas to start the race. So on the second stint of the race, they would be on the faster medium tire, and, the Red Bulls would have to go to that slower hard tire. So first off, Mercedes outplayed Red Bull right there with getting the strategy call right. And then on top of that, Max Verstappen had an extremely slow pit stop, an 11-second pit stop, which for Red Bull, a team that usually has world record pit stops, as clearly a horrible stop, put them on the back foot. And immediately, I have to think that Max Verstappen got hot under the collar, got really mad, really upset, and then went into that first corner really just pissed off, plain out and flat out and simple, and then made a horrible decision that he was going to basically try to force two into one. And that's exactly what happened. The crash was inevitable at that point, and it took out the two championship contenders out of that race. And I know we've inevitably got to go back to it. We compared them to the rivalry, the great rivalry of Senna and Prost before, and this was just like Senna and Prost at Japan. The two rivals taking each other out and in affecting the championship in the long run. And I think, obviously, the stewards came to the right decision in blaming Max Verstappen and saying that he was predominantly to blame. And he's now picked up a 3-place grid penalty going forward at Sochi. And, it's arguable if that grid penalty was enough. I personally think it should have been a 5-place grid penalty. And I think that would have been more of a rightful penalty for the decision that he made. And not only that he took out 2 cars out of the race, but he put Lewis Hamilton in an extremely dangerous position with Max Verstappen's car coming over the top of Lewis Hamilton's. And there's pictures where it clearly shows Max Verstappen's tire dipping on the back of Lewis Hamilton's helmet. Lewis Hamilton's helmet even took damage. There's pictures to prove that as well. So the people that are saying that it wasn't that bad of a crash and that there wasn't much danger there, Fernando Alonso, surprisingly, one of the drivers, saying that he didn't think it was that bad of a crash because it wasn't at high speed. But honestly, I hate to say it, you sounded like an idiot, Fernando, because clearly this was a dangerous crash with another car going over the top of another car and having a wheel dip on the top of a driver's head. If it wasn't for the halo, that beautifully designed device that they brought in during the 2018 season, this could have been a fatal crash for Lewis Hamilton. So for people saying that it wasn't a major crash, it clearly was, and it was a very dangerous one. Obviously, the stewards agree with that. They looked at it, they blamed Max Verstappen, and they've given him the grid penalty going forward at Sochi. And like I said, I think it's rightfully earned. But I've got serious concern going forward here for the health and safety of other drivers when Max Verstappen is making moves like this and putting other drivers at risk. And we've got to go back and talk about the history that Max Verstappen has hit other drivers, and it was the running joke in Formula One that you had to give Max Verstappen plenty of room or he was going to take you out. And it's something that has just continued on throughout his career, that he continues to make these decisions. And you have other great Formula One drivers of the past coming out and questioning his decision making. Jackie Stewart just came out just today and questioned his maturity and his decision making, saying that, he clearly made the wrong decision there and is just thinking with a short temper and a short fuse. And then Damon Hill came out and said clearly Max Verstappen is the one to blame there. And Damon Hill said he saw it 2 ways, that either it was a tactical foul to take out the number one contender in the championship, or that it was just a poor decision in the heat of the moment from Max Verstappen. Either way, full blame on Max Verstappen for this crash from Damon Hill and also Toto Wolff. Obviously, Toto Wolff is the lead principal at Mercedes, so he's a little biased. I totally get it. But I have to agree. I agree with everything that those guys say, and I've got to put full blame on Max Verstappen here. He's a dangerous driver at this point. We've talked about it in the past, how he always expects everybody else to back out like he owns the track. And this is a clear moment where Lewis Hamilton was ahead on track, had every right to that turn, and took every moment of that was played right by Lewis Hamilton, even the pinching of Max Verstappen off the track. You have every right to do that as long as you're not forcing your opponent fully off the track. He gave plenty of room there. Max Verstappen still decided that he wanted to dive in deep and try to force 2 into 1. It was clearly the wrong decision. He ended up forcing the crash, taking both drivers out. I really do think it was a tactical foul by Max Verstappen, just saying, hey, he's going to get ahead of me. He's going to retake the lead in the championship here. I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to crash both of us out here. So I've got to put full blame on Max Verstappen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure whether I think he did it on purpose or if it was just a bad decision, like you said. I mean, you know, on the one hand, like you mentioned, he's in first place, and you know, was he trying to take out Lewis Hamilton so neither of them would get points this week? But you know, I'm sure him and Christian Horner and everybody at Red Bull knows something like this could happen, and when a crash like this does happen, where it's clearly his fault, three places in the grid, Brandon. So, you know, do you actually think it was definitely Verstappen choosing to do this?
I do. I really do think this was a calculated decision by Max Verstappen. And like I said, I think you can compare it to the Senna and Prost crash at Japan, where I also think those were both calculated decisions of, hey, I'm going to take out the #1 contender here, and neither one of us are going to get points. So the points change, they stay the same, and I keep my lead, my 5-point championship lead. So I really do think either way, I think even if that was a calculated decision, it was a poor decision by Max Verstappen because he put another driver at risk, and he also put himself at risk. And on top of that, a team that's already taken a lot of damage and paid out a lot of damage this year is Red Bull, his own team. And so now he's got more damage to that car, more money they're going to have to pay out. He's got an engine penalty coming forward. They might take it at Sochi. But I've really got to put full blame on Max Verstappen here for this crash. And like I said before, I think it should have been a 5-place grid penalty. So I think the penalty is not actually fitting. I think it should be more.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. You know, I think, you know, I know the stewards agree with your assessment too. And I mean, they gave him the 3-place penalty. But he also, you know, they mentioned that he attempted the turn too late. It was at turn 1 and he wasn't close enough to Hamilton to make the trying to get by him, and then they were past turn 1 and going towards turn 2, and that's when he tried to make the move, and he wasn't close enough before, and that's why they gave him the 3-place penalty. So the stewards clearly had, you know, rhyme and reason to give him that 3-place grid penalty for the next race. I guess my question is, you know, if, you know, Red Bull clearly knows that they could get this 3-place penalty, you know, would they intentionally do something knowing that this could set them up poorly for the next race? Because that's exactly what just happened with this penalty.
I don't think Red Bull had no choice. This was all in the hands of Max Verstappen. And you know what I mean? And at some point, it's all in the hands of the driver, and they make the final decision and the final call, whether it's right or wrong. And I think Max Verstappen was in the heat of the moment, like I said, after taking an 11-second pit stop and being put on an alternate strategy that was clearly going to put him, you know, finishing either 3rd or even 4th in the race with the way that the McLarens were running out on track, that Max Verstappen knew, like, this is the only way I'm going to be able to hold my lead is by taking out Lewis Hamilton, or not even taking him out. Let's say that, like, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. But he knew, I've got to try to force this situation and force my way ahead of Lewis Hamilton, or he's going to retake the championship lead on me and go ahead and beat me here in this race. So I just think either way, a poor decision and a tactical foul by Max Verstappen here at the Italian Grand Prix.
Yeah, no question. I think you're right. I think it was more just being like over aggressive. You know, I mean, Verstappen's always been an aggressive driver. This was above and beyond aggressiveness. And, if somebody thinks that, a tire from a car or a wheel from a car going over another driver's head isn't that serious of a crash. Like, are you kidding me? It's going over the guy's head. I don't understand that at all. So, I mean, this was clearly a serious crash. I think Verstappen and Hamilton respect each other. So I don't know if he was trying to hurt Lewis Hamilton, but at the same time, he was trying to get an advantage. He was being, even more aggressive than Verstappen normally is. And I think that's where he got in trouble. And like you said, it might have just been frustration where he just said, I got to get in there. I gotta try to get by him at this point. It was just horrible timing, and it was a bad decision by Max Verstappen. And now he's going to pay for it with that three-place grid penalty.
Yeah, I mean, quickly before we move on and try to finish out the show here, I think it's one of those things where it's arguable if the penalty's enough, and if it's really going to even hurt him at Sochi, a track where Red Bull's potentially taking about replacing their engine and taking an engine penalty and going to the back of the grid anyway. And so he'd kind of take, that penalty would kind of be wiped out by him taking an engine penalty and going to the back. And then he'll have plenty of horsepower to overtake almost everybody there and get himself back to the front. So that's why, to me, it's arguable if the penalty is even enough going forward, that I still think it should have been at least a 5-place grid penalty, and that would have sent more of a message to Max Verstappen. But one thing quickly before we go on that a lot of other people are talking about is, Max Verstappen, when there was that high-speed crash at Silverstone, clearly got out and was kind of complaining and moaning about the celebrations and all that stuff, and about how nobody cared about how he had to go to the hospital and check on him. Well, when he just rolled his car over the top of Lewis Hamilton and dropped his tire on Lewis Hamilton's head, Max Verstappen just jumped out of his car like nothing happened, walked right by Lewis Hamilton's car, did not even check on him, did not care, just started walking back to the paddock, and also walked onto the live track where the stewards the track marshals were yelling at him to be like, get off the track, man. You could potentially get killed yourself by getting hit by the cars that are still coming around. So just more poor decision-making by Max Verstappen, and clearly a lack of respect for his competitor, not even checking on him after he just crashed him out of the race. So I've got to think, is that respect getting strained at this point going forward? If I'm Lewis Hamilton, that's out the window at this point, and I'm done with Max Verstappen, and I'm racing him as hard as possible to the end of the season. But the lack of respect, I think, is clearly shown there with him not checking on Lewis Hamilton at all and just walking back to the pits and just jumping out of his car almost like, hey, job done, job completed. And that's why I think it was more a tactical foul and a tactical decision by Max Verstappen to take him out. And clearly this is Max walking on the live track, and you had the marshals yelling at him to get back and get off the track. So I just think many, many poor decisions by Max Verstappen. And I've got to say this, and this is one thing that's going to inflame a lot of people, but I call them the Dutch dummy, because he just made so many dumb decisions in that race and put a lot of other people at risk. So, hey, we'll see, but we'll have plenty of comments about it.
Folks, if you like this show, you're watching it right now on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. That's Comeback Sports on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel, Comeback Sports. And then all the cut-ups that our awesome producer, Ben Kudo, puts together after the show, that'll all filter to your YouTube channel. You don't have to go search for it. It's just right there in your subscriptions.